You're listening to the Pithy Chronicle. History with a bite. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica. And we bring you history's dirtiest deeds, dripping with sarcasm.
Are you hungry yet?
Welcome back, Pithy listeners, and thank you for helping us reach our download goal this month. We are very excited and very grateful for your support and encouragement, and each of these new milestones allows us to bring you even more scintillating historical content.
And speaking of grateful, we are so excited to welcome a new patron on our Patreon, Anne Marie.
Shout out Anne Marie.
So if you are interested in becoming a patron on Patreon, if you're interested in supporting us in non-financial ways, you can check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. A follow, a like, a subscribe, and download us on Apple and Spotify and Google, wherever you get your podcasts.
Most importantly, we're super excited that you're here to listen.
I'm so excited about this episode.
I am too. This is season 3. And it is entitled Women at War, referring to both literal and metaphorical struggles women have faced throughout history. And today's episode, The Battle of the Matildas, is a wonderful example of both.
Literal clashing of swords, battlefields strewn with slain bodies, revolts, and sieges.
But also the fight for equality, the right to rule, for the refusal to be cast aside because of one's gender.
Today's story has it all. So don your armor, saddle up, and let's do this.
As the title suggests, the two main players are both named Matilda. And actually, there's at least 2 more Matildas thrown in for good measure. And even more confusingly, almost all of the men are named Henry.
Because no English monarchs have imagination.
We know the names will get confusing, so we will do our very best to keep everyone straight and clarify when needed. To do this story justice, we are going to tell it not once, but twice. Once from each woman's perspective. Today, I'm going to lay out the life and legacy of Empress Matilda, whose crown was stolen from her by a conniving cousin and his power-hungry wife.
That's definitely one version of events. Because next week, I'm going to turn the tables and argue that the entitled Empress Matilda did not deserve the throne, in fact was a usurper and treasonous woman, and instead, the title and glory were earned by the clever and capable Queen Matilda, not that conniving cousin Stephen.
So, the Empress versus Queen showdown begins now. Once upon a time, almost 1,000 years ago, a little girl lived in a fledgling kingdom called England. Her grandfather, known to history as William the Conqueror, invaded the Anglo-Saxon island, claiming it for Normandy. Matilda's father, King Henry I of England and Duke of Normandy, was the youngest son of the great warrior and his queen, Matilda of Flanders. King Henry then legitimized his power and status through a marriage to Matilda of Scotland, whose father was King Malcolm III of Scotland, a descendant of the Anglo-Saxon King Alfred the Great. And so, when it came to naming the newly born English princess, the only acceptable name was, of course,
Matilda. And she was granddaughter of Saint Margaret of Scotland.
Oh.
Sainthood's pretty important back in the day.
It is.
I love her.
She's fine. I'm going with fine. Matilda's brother, William Adeline, was born, giving his father the ever-important and often elusive heir. And I guess the couple decided that one of each, a boy and a girl, was the perfect family, for they had no more.
Yeah, okay. Except those 22 illegitimate half-siblings.
Well, yeah, but
22, Caroline!
It's a big number, but do they really count?
I mean, at least one of them is really, really integral to the story.
All right, fine. It was a cozy family of legitimate and illegitimate kids, along with actually a number of close cousins, and they were a very rowdy, boisterous court. Matilda was given a traditional female education, which revolved around religion. And when she was of a reasonable age, her father used his daughter, as most kings do, to cement alliances.
So as I'm holding my daughter this morning, I need to know, what is a, quote, reasonable age?
6.
Ooh, yes, that's gonna be a no for me and a no for you, little girl. You will not be doing anything at 6.
She has found her voice.
Oh god, yes she has. There will be nothing for you other than first grade at 6.
King Henry V, King of Germany and Holy Roman Emperor, proposed, and King Henry I of England, Daddy, accepted. This was a big coup for the young English Empire, and she was shipped off to Germany 2 years later at age 8. So, better.
Dare I ask how old Henry was?
The dad or the betrothed? Because they actually weren't that different. The husband was 24 when Matilda at 8 arrived. But much to our relief, he did not marry her right away. He had the decency to wait until she was 12, having her educated in the German style in the meantime. Courtly manners, the language, the history, things like that. The couple were married in 1114, but they did not have a peaceful honeymoon period. Instead, political conflict with Rome led to hubby Henry being excommunicated in a power play by Pope Pascal II. Henry and Matilda fled across the Alps to, quote-unquote, settle matters in Rome, and Pope Pascal II fled.
I can definitely see where her enmity with the church comes in a little bit later.
Yeah, she's never very trusting of the church.
I can see
this.
why.
But it's actually a pretty good opportunity for her, because the frightened Pope left behind an envoy who truly had no other alternative but to crown the monarchs at St. Peter's Basilica, proclaiming them Holy Roman Emperor and Empress. And, fun fact, that sacrificial envoy was later excommunicated for his trouble.
Oh, that's no good. I am sorry,
Yeah.
Sacrificial envoy.
The Pope also refused to acknowledge their illustrious new titles, but Henry and Matilda really didn't care. They got new stationery and business cards printed up, and in fact, Matilda held on to the title and its corresponding crowns for the rest of her life, even when they really didn't belong to her
that's
anymore.
a pretty ballsy move. I'm here for that at least.
This woman had guts. The power couple still had fires to put out. Henry left Rome, returning to Germany to suppress rebellions, as kings do, and that left Matilda to govern their holdings in Italy. She was now just 16 years old, and this is when she really came into herself. She gained considerable governing experience at this time and seemingly had no trouble ruling despite her gender. It was an early lesson for her. Women can rule. But tragedy struck 4 years later in 1122. Matilda's only brother...
Legitimate brother.
Fine, yes, all right, fine. Matilda's only legitimate brother, William Adeline, died.
Oh, the White Ship disaster. It literally wiped out an entire generation of nobility.
The entire English court was moving from Normandy back to England across the Channel in a number of ships. And the White Ship, the sleekest and the fastest, was full of 300 plus young nobles who were basically on a booze cruise.
It sounds a whole lot like the unsinkable ship.
Well, there were no icebergs.
Well, there's that.
Well, there's that. But while the king and his more mature nobles sailed sedately and separately in their ships, the medieval yacht was overcrowded and sloppy because even the crew was drunk. And it sank. All but 2 passengers died.
And how bad must you feel if you're the 2 passengers?
Yeah,
Talk about survivor's guilt.
Somebody had to tell what happened, I guess.
It was a disastrous moment in English history by any record, and almost every noble family lost 1 or more children in the accident. But despite the entire court's grief, no one dared tell the king.
For 2 days, the grieving nobility feigned ignorance. They're walking around pretending their own children have not died until finally Out of desperation, a noble pushed a young page in front of the king to deliver the devastating news.
My God, they are just
Talk about a sacrificial lamb.
Yeah, they are sacrificing people left, right, and center in this story.
It's said that King Henry fell to his knees and wept. Not only was it obviously a very tragic personal loss, but it threw the succession into doubt. Who would inherit the crown now? England was a very new empire, and while France, which technically held Normandy, had an established tradition of primogeniture.
No, it didn't.
It was reasonably established.
Well, so no, it's Salic law at that point. It's not straight up primogeniture. The only reason I know this is because I'm a nerd.
No, we knew that bit. I'm keeping that laugh for my laugh reel.
So basically, it's not straight up primogeniture because it does have a preference for those born into the purple. So born while the king is the king.
Okay, that makes sense. So the oldest male heir born while the king was king.
Normandy is still under very much a Viking tradition in which the strongest hold power, and that is why the succession right was so in question.
Okay, but England is still... It's a marrying of these Anglo-Saxon traditions along with this French notion of primogeniture. Mm-hmm. Previously, the Anglo-Saxons had a preference for uncles inheriting. So England had no set customs, is what I was going for.
Which is true.
Instead, what the Anglo-Saxons had done, and to some extent the Normans, was identify a pool of legitimate heirs and then kind of sit back while they were left to challenge one another and figure out who was the strongest.
Exactly. Let's not forget that the Normans essentially are Vikings. They descend from Rollo the Viking.
And frankly, the Anglo-Saxons had a lot of Viking in them as well,
So this is still Viking. You know, you're gonna fight till the death.
Even William the Conqueror's own sons had struggled amongst themselves for this newly minted British crown. In fact, there had never been a peaceful, uncontested succession for the English throne.
And there still won't be.
Nope. We're now looking at 20 plus years of waste and war to figure out this sticky situation.
So recap. Empress Matilda is ruling Italy for her husband, HRE Henry, when all this takes place.
Exactly. And when her brother dies, she tries to return to England to console her father and probably to discuss the whole issue of inheritance. But the way is blocked by an angry count who wanted his moment in history and refused her passage through his lands.
And therefore he got this moment in history.
He did, and therefore King Henry I, Matilda's dad, hastily remarries to Adeliza of Louvain in hopes of fathering another son. Toot sweet.
Wah, wah, wah.
Okay, yeah, it didn't work out. And in the meantime, Matilda and her Henry were also unable to conceive. Neither party was believed to be infertile. They were likely childless because they honestly just didn't spend that much time together. Matilda was still very young, and, if you believe the chroniclers, Emperor Henry was cursed for his sins against the church.
Ooh, so Pope Pascal II finally got his revenge?
Something like that, yeah.
It sounds a little bit like witchcraft. Are you cursing people to have no children?
This is not the episode for that. But honestly, it does feel like the English crown has a bit of a curse on it for a couple of millennia. Anywho, it could have also been Henry's ill health, because he was suffering from cancer and he died 3 years after the White Ship disaster in 1125. Leaving Matilda as protector of their nephew Frederick, heir to the Holy Roman Empire.
And Matilda couldn't seize that power without a son.
Exactly. She had been ruling fine as a woman, but because she didn't have any legitimate heirs to throw into the pot, she wasn't going to have much of a say in what happened next. And
right, because she has no sojourn rights,
exactly.
So in her own right.
Which leaves her with two options: nunnery or remarriage.
Oh, choices.
She chose the latter, which I think I would too at that. She's only 25.
Yeah.
And she returns to her father's estates in Normandy, giving up her German estates, but taking with her all of the jewels, imperial regalia, a valuable religious relic, the hand of St. James the Apostle, and 2 of Henry's most elaborate imperial crowns.
She sounds like a little bit of a klepto.
So, hubby Henry is dead. The Empress has returned from Normandy. Daddy Henry is remarried but doesn't manage to impregnate his second wife, and England is getting anxious. There's really no other option. Henry declares Matilda his rightful successor, unless of course he has a son. We have to always keep that open, but He forces his Anglo-Norman barons to swear allegiance to Matilda. And now she obviously needs a husband.
Obviously.
Mostly to ensure that she has sons. Dad Henry hopes to live long enough to bypass Matilda and pass the throne to a grandson. In diapers, whatever, as long as he's got a penis. And that might have worked if he had picked someone Matilda actually liked.
I don't even think that she needed to like him, but I'll get into that later.
King Henry's deceased son, the one who died in the White Ship disaster, was intended to marry the daughter of Count Fulk V of Anjou. It was part of an alliance to protect Normandy from Flanders. By the way, her name was also Matilda, just for kicks and giggles. But after William's death, he inadvertently left the Norman holdings unprotected. So King Henry fixes this problem by marrying the former Empress Matilda to Count Fulk's son, Joffrey.
And you can't deny that Empress to Countess it's a downgrade, man.
And it's not even Countess yet. The Count is still alive. It's Countess to
right.
be. It's not great. She was pissed. Not only is he a count, but also he's 13.
And is she still 25 at this point, or has she gotten older?
She's 25. Yeah, 13, 25.
No, that is prime pimples and hormones and gross.
Yeah, it's sit alone in your room with some lotion and a sock. It's not great.
Oh, gross.
And that's
gross. I mean, yes, but gross.
Sorry. That's what Matilda said. Gross. And yet...
or keep it in.
Oh, God. And yet... Well, they really didn't get along.
I'm so shocked.
The age difference was pretty awkward. And dowry disputes over castles in Normandy created a lot of tension. And then, of course, King Henry purposefully kept Joffrey's position / future within the English Empire pretty vague. Would he be king, prince consort, nothing?
Just keeping him on his toes.
Things got so bad that Matilda actually left him for a while, which Henry blamed completely on Joffrey, and so do I.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, the old king's need for a grandson meant that he forced a reconciliation. And 5 years after their union, Matilda finally bore a son, Henry.
Of course.
And then another son, Joffrey.
Ooh, also obvious.
And then a third, William.
Bang, 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 heir, spare.
Like she was going bowling. Henry I was delighted to be a grandfather. Not so much for the cuddles and bouncing babies on his knee, but because he finally had a male heir in place.
Mm-hmm.
But while he legally proclaimed them his successors, he didn't actively support their place at court or that of his daughter or his son-in-law. Tensions rose. Joffrey and Matilda asked Henry to let them rule Normandy, trying to get their feet wet in governing a kingdom, and Henry absolutely and angrily refused. Henry was very concerned about Joffrey. Despite forcing his daughter into this marriage, he didn't trust the guy. He feared Joffrey would seize power in Normandy, which was confirmed when Joffrey and Matilda militarily backed a rebellion in the south of Normandy against the English crown / Henry / dad.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty explicit. You're an open rebellion. You are committing
open
treason.
rebellion. And then, before anything could be decided, Henry died.
Ooh, well, that's awkward.
There is no record of Henry saying anything about the succession on his deathbed, and perhaps I should say no legitimate record, because pro-Matilda sources argue that he confirmed her as his heir, while anti-Matilda sources say he actually apologized to his barons for ever forcing them to swear allegiance to her and released them from these oaths.
How very House of the Dragon.
Oh, yes indeed. As Henry lays dying, his loving, quote-unquote, daughter, Matilda, and dislikable son-in-law, Joffrey, are literally hanging out in the rebel camp working against his royal army.
Those are crappy optics.
There's not much you can say to fix that, no.
No.
Matilda is also heavily pregnant with her third son at the time.
And I'm sure that makes it difficult to cross the channel, so she's stuck.
She is stuck in southern Normandy with her husband that she hates, facing a growing resistance from the Norman barons. They tried to seize castles that were actually technically hers, given by Daddy Henry to Matilda upon her marriage as part of her dowry. But they failed to seize them, despite legalese, and they turned to pillaging, which only increases the Norman resistance against the couple.
The Normans knew how to build castles.
And Matilda and Joffrey did not know how to raid them.
No.
Unlike Matilda, her cousin, Stephen of Blois, favorite nephew of King Henry I, was in Boulogne, supporting his uncle's army. And upon hearing the news, he immediately departed for England, raced to London, and proclaimed himself king with the full support of Londoners.
Enlighten me. Why? Why do they want him?
A few reasons. He was raised at court alongside Matilda, her legitimate brother, and all of the other illegitimate siblings, so he was well known to Londoners. He also hadn't been shipped off to Germany at age 8, so there's that. Second, his brother, Henry, another Henry, was the Bishop of Winchester, and he threw the entire English church's support behind his brother, Stephen.
And by extension, the popes.
Yeah, the Pope was pro-Stephen. Pretty much the whole time. And third, the people of London hoped that, as a born and raised Englishman, Stephen would be more likely to give them new rights and privileges, more so at least than the very dogmatic Empress Matilda. But there was a problem. Stephen had technically sworn to support Matilda as queen, not once, but twice. Oopsies. Fortunately, brother Henry, the bishop, relieved him of that oath, claiming that King Henry had actually changed his mind on his deathbed, leaving the throne to Stephen.
Well, was Henry, the bishop, at King Henry's deathbed when this happened?
No, absolutely not. But all the same, Stephen was crowned king at Westminster Abbey on December 22nd, 1135.
So next week, when we hear Queen Matilda's side of the story, I'll talk more about Stephen and his watery vows. But for now, it's important to note that Stephen was actually not a very good warrior.
I had read that he had some pretty good battle experience early on.
He was not a hardened warrior like
Okay.
many of the kings previous.
He was a nice guy.
He was a good time guy. And that was his problem. He was too nice, number one, but he just genuinely wanted everybody to get along. Let's just get along to get along. But he was a trusted ally of King Henry, very much a favorite. But, as we said, he lacked a kingly instinct and a ruthlessness that he just didn't possess.
And we will see that in just a minute.
Mm-hmm.
For 3 years, Stephen ruled England uncontested, as Matilda gave birth and established a stronghold along the Norman border. Her husband, ever helpful Joffrey, invaded Normandy numerous times with mild success, but instead of keeping the territory and then encouraging the loyalty of the people and the barons, he just torched and pillaged, inspiring hate.
Wow, he's a keeper. Just so great.
So Stephen, therefore, should be sitting pretty. But after his impressive coup and seizure of power, he kind of just lost his mojo. He tried to defeat Matilda, or really the threat of Matilda, as she had done absolutely nothing right now to depose him. He made an alliance with France's Louis VI and attempted to take back her Norman castles, which again, were legally hers by way of her dowry. And when he failed to do this, he actually ended up paying her 2,000 marks per year for peace in Normandy.
Well, that just kind of is a turntables, paying vassalship to Normandy.
It's not great optics, as we've said before, and it's just very, let's just get along, y'all.
Told you.
Chill. It was the first of many failures by Stephen. Matilda's uncle, David I of Scotland, her mother's brother, sensing Stephen's weakness, invaded England after Henry's death, taking key strongholds. After seeing this, southern Wales rose up in rebellion as well. And after Stephen failed to suppress the Welsh revolt, a lot of other revolts popped up. It was like a game of whack-a-mole, and poor Stephen just couldn't keep up. Nobles became more vocal against Stephen, especially Robert, Earl of Gloucester, Matilda's very important, illegitimate half-brother. England was now descending into civil war. Robert of Gloucester renounced his fealty to Stephen and declared support for the legitimate queen, his half-sister, Matilda. In fact, it's been argued that Robert was really the driving force behind Matilda's attempt to reclaim her throne. After all, she hadn't done anything at this point to assert her claims since 1135, when Stephen was crowned, and Robert declared war in 1138. And then husband Joffrey helped out by reinvading Normandy, again, to distract and divide Stephen's forces. Uncle David, the King of Scotland, then invaded northern England again in support of his niece. So we have a lot of moving parts, with Stephen stuck in the middle, mallet in hand, unsure who to whack first. And this is when Queen Matilda really proves herself. And Eric is excited, but for now, we will just say that Stephen dispatched his trustworthy queen, Matilda, to tackle the Kentish revolt inspired by Robert of Gloucester. And then he sent his faithful knights north against the Scots, and he himself headed south to suppress Bristol. All the while, Matilda's excitable half-bro, Robert, was in Normandy, desperately trying to convince Matilda to, fight for her own damn crown.
I don't know that he had to convince too hard.
She was not eager.
I mean,
it's hard to say if she was like, let's wait for the right
quite
time.
Frankly, with Joffrey at her side, I wouldn't want to do anything. I should have gone to the nunnery.
Send me to a nunnery, Matilda is thinking. At this point, both Matilda and Stephen sent envoys to Rome arguing their claims to the Pope. And of course, the Pope sides with Stephen, mostly because he doesn't like Matilda, because she insisted on being an empress when he was not there, and also because Stephen's brother is that very influential bishop named Henry, and he's kind of put the church on Stephen's side. Plus, he's a man.
And Matilda of Boulogne, Queen Matilda, is a very big supporter of the church and uses that as a very critical chess piece.
I know you like Queen Matilda. Just chill. And now we're here. Civil War. Finally, in the summer of 1139, Matilda invades. Her stepmother, Dowager Queen Adeliza of Louvain, who has now remarried, invites her to use Arundel Castle, Adeliza's home, as a base of operations.
We do love some familial support.
And Stephen eventually besieges the castle and traps Matilda inside.
Uh-oh.
But then, in another quintessential Stephen stupid move.
So true. It's
another in a series of stupid Stephen moves, because he just can't get this right. Despite surrounding the entire castle, he agrees to a truce, the terms of which are unknown. But what we do know is the result. Matilda was released and safely escorted to southwest England to reunite with her greatest supporter and ally, her half-brother Robert.
You know the saying,
but why?
No good deed goes unpunished? That's Stephen.
Stephen believes the best of people. Stephen is stupid.
And next week, there will be a lot more Stephen hate. I have nothing good to say about him.
All right, so why would he have done this? Let's help Stephen out a little bit.
Okay.
Number one, he likely thought that Robert was his real enemy. As I said, Robert had been pushing this. He'd initiated this whole conflict. And so he might have thought that Matilda would see the light, be grateful for her release, and run home with the tail between her legs. Additionally, Arundel Castle was generally believed to be impregnable, so perhaps Stephen thought that a huge siege was a hopeless waste of resources, and that if he spent his time, money, and energy on starving Matilda out, Robert, who was not there and was in southwest England, would then be free to attack him from the west. But mostly, historians argue that Stephen was just a really, really nice guy, but not a lot going on upstairs. He was a chivalrous knight. He believed in courtly etiquette, and therefore women were not supposed to be a part of or a pawn in warfare. So he probably just thought he was doing the right thing.
Yeah, like I said, no good deed goes unpunished for Stephen of Blois.
Stephen. Okay, King Stephen and his noble ways were just wrong. Matilda had plenty of fight within her, and she did not run home to Normandy. Instead, she retreated to her half-brother's estates and prepared for battle.
So I guess we're going to the Battle of Lincoln now?
We are going to the Battle of Lincoln. It was a pretty good battle. Very back and forth. If you were watching it like a basketball
game.
If you were rooting for one side or the other, the tension was there, the drama, the suspense. Oh, Stephen's ahead. Oh, Robert's ahead. I mean Matilda. Oh, it's so hard to keep them straight. There were so many brave and daring warriors that fought and died, but in the end, Stephen was captured, taken prisoner, and that pretty much ended the battle.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, so Matilda received him in person. She was like, oh, hey, cuz, I know we were raised together, but I'm gonna put you in the Bristol Castle.
And I'm not gonna be chivalrous and let you go.
I'm a woman that does not apply to me. Here is the place where we traditionally hold high-status prisoners. She also made a secret deal with Bishop Henry, Stephen's formerly very loyal brother, and he gave her the church's full support in exchange for control of church affairs. So he's just a turncoat.
He is.
Henry, the bishop, then hands over the royal treasury, what was left after 6 years of continual warfare, and then he excommunicated any noble who refused to switch to Matilda's side. And Stephen, for his part, chivalrously released his subjects who had sworn him fealty.
I am so sorry.
What? Guys, I know you swore to support me till your death, but, I get it. I'm in prison now. Go with Matilda. It's unbelievable. And now you would think Matilda's in. Empress Matilda will become Queen Matilda. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah, the Domina Angelorum,
The clergy proclaim her the monarch, give her the title Lady of England and Normandy. Geoffrey de Bandeville, who controlled the Tower of London, also gave her his support. Everything was all but finished.
But then
Londoners did not like the Empress Matilda. They found her haughty and entitled, probably because she was still being referred to as an empress, and they were like, They also, at this moment, could literally see Queen Matilda encircling the city, burning as she goes, ready for a fight.
And Londoners freaking loved Matilda of Boulogne. Loved her. Obsessed with her.
Not Stephen.
No.
Matilda. The wrong Matilda. Mm-hmm. Just days before the planned coronation, the city of London rose up against the Empress, forcing her to flee. And seeing the tides turn, Bishop Henry flip-flopped again and pushed the church once more to support his imprisoned brother, Stephen.
I just have nothing positive to say about the Bishop of Winchester. Nothing.
I have nothing positive to say about either of these brothers.
No, they're...
Well, actually, that's not true. Stephen was chivalrous.
Yeah.
Whatever this is, not chivalrous. Half-brother Robert bravely distracts the anti-Matilda forces, giving his sister time to escape, while he himself is sacrificially captured. And now both sides have VIPs.
Yes. Very important prisoners.
And seeing no other way, they decide on a prisoner exchange. Stephen for Robert.
A king for an earl. And all of the chess players are back on the board.
Everybody's back, and it does seem like an unfair exchange. To me. Anyway, there's more back and forth, little skirmishes, until at last, Stephen and his men storm Oxford, where Matilda was encamped. He now has the opportunity and the ability and the men and the power to storm the castle, take Matilda prisoner, and end this thing. But instead, chivalrous and stupid Stephen decides to wait her out in a long Christmas siege.
Because we can't fight at Christmas.
He was too chivalrous. His men deserve to go home and spend it with their families? I don't know. Matilda, the daughter and granddaughter of conquering warriors, proves herself as she daringly sneaks out of the castle in the dead of night, dressed all in white to camouflage herself against the freshly fallen snow. Half-starved, she rode like a man astride the saddle. So desperate was she. And eventually, as her condition worsened, her loyal men put her on a stretcher, bound between two horses, to bring her to safety. Now, listeners, I'm sure you're wondering, will this miserable war ever flipping end?
Not really.
It was a stalemate. Both sides had little victories here and there, but nothing was resolved. Instead, it was the common men and women who paid the price as their lands were ravaged and their nobles killed on the battlefields. Over time, many of Empress Matilda's key supporters died, to include her most noble brother, Robert of Gloucester. Others abandoned her war for the glory of the Second Crusade. Sorry, something caught my throat. Anyway, I hate the Crusades. I'm sorry, I'm super PO'd about the Crusades. It's been 400, 500, 600 years, and I haven't gotten over it.
You're still PO'd?
I'm still pissed. Individual barons, exhausted, made peace to secure their lands, and basically everyone was like, we're tired, we want to go home. We don't care. Pick. Matilda returned to Normandy, and it was her firstborn son, Henry, who took up her cause. Dad, Joffrey, began to groom Henry, the son, for command, involving him in the family business, warfare, and desperate causes. While Mom Matilda ran out of money. In fact, she was so broke that she was living in a quote-unquote borrowed castle and couldn't afford to pay for her son Henry's mercenaries when he got stuck in England, once again trying to take the throne. And who do you think bailed out the future Henry II? Who could it be?
Oh my god. The only nice guy in this story.
Stephen!
The good uncle.
The chivalrous idiot. He should seriously be a court jester. He actually paid Henry's men, the ones literally waging war against him, to make sure that his first cousin, once removed, got home safely.
Again! He's just so nice.
He's just so stupid. Matilda was tired, and then Joffrey died, and she was kind of excited about
Thank
that.
God.
Thank God.
Yeah, who couldn't be excited
Bye,
about that?
Joffrey. And Stephen's confidant and advisor, Queen Matilda, died, which we're all very sad about. Followed shortly after by their eldest son and heir. So, no one had any fight left in them. No one, that is, except Henry. Matilda's son was young, strong, capable, and renowned among historians to this day for his enormous amount of energy. He is like my 5-year-old son.
Too much energy.
In many, many sexual and non-sexual ways, yeah.
In many
So
regards.
He never slept. Mm-hmm. He loved to exercise. He had the heart of 10 men and the stamina of 20. He was a remarkable character, and he had enough mojo to go around.
But he's not the subject of today's episode, Caroline.
But needless to say, the ailing Stephen could not face another 20 years fending off this young foe.
Well, he needs an heir.
He had an heir. He had another son.
No, they died.
One of them died. Eustace died. But he still had William I, and he was alive, and he cut his son out of the deal.
I see the strategy. I don't find it to be as cold as it seems.
I don't either. I'm with you. I think it was the right decision by Stephen. Again, it's him being like, guys, can't we all just get along? I think if Queen Matilda had still been alive, she would have been like, hell no, you won't cut my son out of this. Mm-hmm. I think had his firstborn son been alive, Stephen would have had something else to fight for.
Well, and then Eustace would have been fighting, too.
But Eustace had just died, and so they made a deal. And I don't disagree with the deal. I think this is one of Stephen's best acts.
It was a smart deal.
To just finish this. In 1153, Henry agreed to recognize Stephen as King of England, and Stephen agreed to adopt Henry as his legal son and heir. The exhausted King Stephen died just 1 year later, and Henry, Matilda's son, was crowned King Henry II of England, using the larger of the two stolen imperial crowns that his mom had taken from Germany way back in 1125 for his own damn coronation.
I mean, why not?
If you've bothered to be a klepto, you should keep stuff. Next week, we will cover this same conflict from a very different point of view. And then we will decide what were each of the Matildas fighting for, and perhaps decide who was truly the most noble of them all. But I will leave you with Matilda's epitaph. Written on her tomb, the Empress Matilda, it says, quote, "Great by birth, greater by marriage, greatest in her offspring. Here lies Matilda, the daughter, the wife, and the mother of Henry.
I mean, that's a great epithet, but God, wonder who wrote it.
So bitchy. You were just a womb. And that, my friends, is that. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica, and we are Pithily Yours.
This episode is brought to you by the Pithy Chronicle, LLC. The Pithy Chronicle is intended for education, entertainment, and non-commercial purposes. Any views or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owner may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. While we offer lots of sarcasm, this podcast does not offer any advice or services. Listening to this podcast may induce fits of laughter, unexpected distraction, or uncontrollable rage at the subjects, hopefully not at us. We hope you learned something today. If not, so sorry. Please be advised we are not experts in the following fields: medical, legal, financial, technological, thermonuclear engineering, submarine warfare, neuroscience, or cat husbandry. Thanks for listening to our little disclaimer. Just covering our history-loving asses. Bye!